In this video, I'm going to show you step by step how I painted this basic still life in watercolor. This is the first painting in my daily painting challenge. If you want to learn more about that and find out how to participate, check out this other video. I'll leave a link in the description below. As I paint this simple painting of a coffee mug, I want to share with you the benefits of painting from life. That is, painting from actual physical objects in front of you rather than painting only from photographs. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to using photographs as an aid to painting. I use them often. But you need to understand the limitations of photographs as a reference, and you should, in my opinion, experience the benefits of painting from life. A photograph of a subject, whether it is a still life subject or a vast landscape, tends to flatten the subject. It is limited in the range of values that it can capture, especially in the shadows and highlights of the image. And a photograph simply cannot communicate all the qualities of the light that are present in the scene. Painting from life, on the other hand, allows you to see the full range of colors and values in the subject. You can better gauge the relative color temperature of different parts of the scene. You're also forced to capture the scene more quickly due to the shifting light and even moving objects. This is actually a good thing, as it pushes you to simplify your subject and focus on the main thing instead of trying to capture all the details of every object in the scene. In this painting, I set up the mug full of coffee in front of me as I painted, and I added a strong light shining on the subject from the right side. This gave me the strong shadows I was looking for. Okay, let's get started with the painting. Okay, as we get started, I want to point out that I have placed the reference image on the upper left corner so that you can see what I see. Ironically, I'm in this video, I'm talking about painting from life, but yet I have just a reference image for you to look at. So sorry I can't show you what I see here in front of me. As I get started, I'm going to begin with painting the entire background. And my main point here is to simplify the background. So instead of trying to put any of that stuff in that you see in the background of the reference image, I'm just ignoring all of that. I've chosen a very warm yellow color. This is actually quinacridone gold, and using very loose brush strokes, just putting in a background. In a bit, I will also put in the cast shadow that is going from the cup towards the left. Let me talk a little bit about the colors I'm using. I'm using all Daniel Smith paints. I have my Magello 18 well palette here on the right, and you can see the colors I'm choosing. In this painting, I'm pretty much using the following colors: quinacridone gold. I'm going to use two different blues, French ultramarine and cobalt blue. Then I'm using two different reds, a warm pyrrole scarlet and a cool permanent alizarin crimson. And then I'm going to use a little neutral tint in a couple places to darken some areas. And finally, for the logo on the mug, I'm using burnt umber. Now I'm taking a little bit of that cooler red, which is permanent alizarin crimson, and I am painting wet on wet now into this area to the left of the mug. Again, the paper is already saturated, wet at that point, so this darker, warmer reddish color really blends with the paint that's already there and creating a very nice soft edge, which is what I want on the edge of this cast shadow. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little bit thicker application of the Quin Gold, and I want to apply it there along the bottom edge of the mug. The darkest part of the shadow is always that part of the shadow that is closest to the object that's casting the shadow. So right along the edge, the bottom edge of the mug will be the darkest part of the shadow. Now, I'm not really matching the color exactly from the reference image there. In real life, I guess that dark area there is a very, very dark brown, almost a black color. But I'm deciding, making an artistic choice, just to keep with this golden color that I've decided to use in the background, and really just deepening and darkening that quinacridone gold along the edge of the mug. Again, you don't have to use the same colors you see in life, but you take your cues, your inspiration from what you see. In this case, I wanted a very bright golden colored background, very simple, taking away all the details of the objects back there and just creating that. And that's what I'm doing here. That's why I decided to stay with the gold color. Now I'm taking that same color, quinacridone gold, and I've painted in the top of the coffee. Again, in real life, that coffee color is a little bit different than the background. A bit more of a muted, almost dull brown color. But I decided to just, again, reuse that same color and kind of create a color harmony in the painting by using the same color. Then I took a little bit of, I think it's my lavender there with some ultramarine blue, and I mixed a very light bluish color, because if you look inside the painting of the mug, inside the coffee area, there's a white shimmer of light, probably coming from the light coming from the right, that's really obvious at in the top portion of the coffee. And so it has a bluish tint to it. So I wanted to create that. So I lifted some of the yellow gold color and I put in the blue. Then I darkened all of that along that edge of the mug there, as you saw I just did, because again, there's different values of color there inside the coffee. Now, I let everything dry, and I'm now moving on to my second wash. And this is where I'm going to actually paint the mug. The mug is white, as you can see, but we don't want to just leave it all white, because white objects, as they actually appear in real life, are not really white. There's all kinds of different colors. Again, in the reference image, the cup appears to be more of a brownish tint, but I like, when I paint white objects, I really like to use blue primarily as the color that I use to create form and shape in the white object. And so I've kind of, again, used artistic license and decided that the darker side, the left side of the mug, is going to be more of a bluish tint, and all the shadow areas are going to be more of a bluish color. I'm also going to bring in some red and even some golden color. I think white looks more interesting in a painting if you can really use lots of different colors. I see blues often in white, but I also see reddish. I see some gold. Now, white objects and many objects in real life, actually, you have to remember they reflect the light and color of objects that are near to them. And so not only are you painting the subject or object itself and its colors, but you're seeing other colors reflected in it. And so clearly there are kind of golden colors or gold tinted colors and objects near this white mug. So it's going to pick up some of those colors. And that's, again, what I'm going to be doing as I go through this process. You can see now I mixed in a little bit of the permanent alizarin crimson, the cool red into my blue mixture there on the palette. And now I'm just blending that right in. Again, the background is dry completely. It's just the mug now that is wet. And so anywhere I paint in the mug, when I paint over an area that's already got paint in it, it is wet into wet. And so it's going to blend quite nicely. And that's what I wanted to do here. I want lots of soft edges. Now let me talk a little bit about the process that we use when we paint in watercolor. Watercolor, unlike other mediums like oil or acrylic, is painted usually from the lightest value areas and then continually building up the values and painting darker objects later. And so the mug here, I've painted in all of the lightest value areas. Again, the left side of the mug has got more of a darker blue color, and the right has more white areas. The white of the paper has been retained. Now I'm painting this area in the inside of the mug above the coffee, and that's somewhat dark in that area too, so I used a blue tint of color there. Now I've taken my neutral tint color there, which is a dark, almost black, but a real gray color, and I've mixed it in with some of the blue on my palette in that lower left area of the palette, so I could create a silvery gray color to paint the spoon. As we see, the spoon, the right side of the spoon is quite dark, and then the side that's closest to us is really got a bright white highlight. And so I've taken one of my nice Princeton Aqua Elite brushes with a really fine point, and I am painting along the back edge of the spoon, being very careful to retain that white highlight along the edge of the spoon. And again, usually I start a painting with a large brush, the largest brush possible, to put in loose, like the background, loose big washes where I don't need detail. But then as I move through the painting, I usually move to a smaller and smaller brush as I go. All right, now I've I've taken some of that Quin Gold that I used earlier, and I saw in the reference, in the subject matter, that there was actually a little bit of a golden color that's reflecting right there underneath the bottom of that handle. And since this area where I put the darker blue under the handle is still wet, I could come right back in and use wet into wet and let that golden color kind of merge and blend with those other colors in that area. All right, now as I continue through the painting process, I'm mixing in, making a little bit more of a lavender color that has a bit more red in it. And I'm going to come back into the left side of the mug and darken the darkest shadow areas of the mug. Sometimes I take water on the brush as I just did, and I come back into an area where I feel like the edge is a little bit too much of a hard edge. I don't want hard edges in the shadow area. The shadow is typically a very soft blending of value from the lighter areas to the darker areas without a lot of hard edges. So if the edges of the paint are too hard, I just come back in and soften those edges with water on the brush. Here along the edge of the handle, there are some hard lines, however. There are some very sharp delineation of light and dark right next to each other. And so, unlike the left side of the mug, I'm kind of putting in a little bit harder edges there. I've taken this darker reddish blue color and I'm just putting in the edge of the logo on the mug. I put that in initially with kind of just a reddish, muted red or purple color. But now, obviously the logo, it's a Starbucks mug. That logo is actually a very dark brown color. And so I've mixed up some of my burnt umber. It's a color there in the lower right corner of the palette. And I'm mixing up a very thick application of that color. By this time, however, that blue background there is pretty much dry. And so I'm painting wet into dry. And I'm also using a very thick mixture of the brown color. That's another thing you need to be aware of when you're painting is how much water is in the brush and in the wash of paint in your palette that you are applying to the painting. If you're painting wet into wet, you have to be very careful not to come back in with too much water on your brush or you'll get a bloom. And those typically are not usually what a watercolor artist wants. And so you kind of want to avoid that blooming effect in your paintings. To do that, you have to control the amount of water in the brush. So I'm using a very thick application of paint, not very much water in the brush, and I'm just coming back in and abstractly painting this logo. I'm not really trying to mimic the exact drawing of the logo. I'm just trying to get the general shapes. There's wording in there in the logo, but I'm again not trying to actually replicate the letters and the words that I see in the logo. I'm just trying to give a sense that this is a logo on the side of the mug. I'm now going to speed this next process up a little bit so you can see a little bit faster how I paint this section. Continuing with the burnt umber, I'm going to finish out that logo and then bring my attention back to finishing up that cast shadow. Using the same burnt umber mixture of paint, I come back in and paint that dark part of the shadow there along the bottom edge of the mug. I'm also using a little bit of my Quin burnt orange, which is kind of like burnt sienna, and mixing that in as well. I think I'm using a number 8, Princeton Aqua Elite number 8 long round brush at this point to get some fine control in extending out this cast shadow from the mug towards the left. It's a really nice brush. It is a smaller brush than I usually use, but it has a very fine point and is a great brush for doing more detailed work. Now I've switched to my Princeton Aqua Elite number 1 liner brush, and this brush will allow me to do even greater detail work. I am working on the fine details of the spoon. Again, there's a very dark shadow side on the left side, and then a highlight, and then some form shadow there. And I want to really capture all of that detail in with this nice fine number 1 brush. The painting is essentially done at this point, and so I get my number 1 liner brush and mix up some nice real dark color here. A color that I think would work well as a signature is that burnt sienna color, and I go ahead and add my signature in the lower right. You kind of want to work on your signature and get it kind of stylized just the way you want it. I stop at this point. I often take a look at the painting, maybe even walk away a little bit and see if it needs anything else. I feel like here, after having done that those dark side of the mug there on the left could use a little bit darker color. I noticed that I missed some areas on the lip of the mug there that could be a little darker and accentuating that edge of the mug. And then right here underneath the handle, that's one of the darkest shadow areas on the mug. And so I just come back in with some of my blue and lavender mixtures of color, and I just, while looking carefully at the reference, I just kind of carefully add that shadow in. So here is my encouragement to you. Find some simple everyday objects from around your home. Set them up in a pleasing arrangement. Set up a light that is illuminating the scene from the side, and paint the subject from life. I think you will discover that this approach to painting can help you see the subject like never before. If you do try painting from life, please let me know how it goes. Leave your thoughts in the comment section of this video. If you have questions, please ask them. I'd love to help if I can. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and keep on growing in watercolor.